Hello and very warm welcome to this video of creating library for Angular step by step for the beginners. In this video we will create the library project from the scratch, and we'll create a very basic counter application in a library, and then we will use that counter in different Angular projects. Finally, we will publish it to the NPM JS, and we will use in different projects. So what is the agenda of this entire video? We will cover what is library, why we need a library, again creating a library from the scratch, using library locally in an Angular application, and then finally publishing the library to the NPM. So let's start with the video. Again, what is library? We can say a library is a collection of pre-compiled routines that a program can use. An Angular library is an Angular project that differed from an Angular application in a terms that it cannot run its own. Before using a library, we must need to import it and used it in an Angular application. Your library may contain components, modules, services, directives, pipes, and anything. It contains shareable code and reusable functionalities. Then the main question is, why I need a library? Do we really need a library? Yes. Sometimes a components or a service on anything could be applicable to multiple Angular application. So in order to use that component or a service in a different application, we are writing it there in a different application again and again. So instead of doing this such thing, we are creating a library so that we can use the same component or a service anywhere, when in any project, whenever we want to use, by simply importing our created library. The libraries can be used locally in your workspace or in your project, or we can also publish them to the NPM packages to share it with another developers or another projects. To create a library, we will use that Angular CLI, and the simple command for the generating a library is ng generate, then library and the name of the library. So we can use that command to generate a library project, as well as in order to use our library in our Angular application, first we need to build the library. So again we can use that Angular CLI to generate a build. So we can say we can create a build using ng build and the name of the library. Then to publish our library or to use it in another project, we first need to create a pack. So we are using that NPM Pack command to create the pack. Then finally, to publish it to the NPM JS server, we will use that registry. We will use that NPM publish command, and we can deploy our library to the actual registry. So I have generated a brand new application using Angular CLI, and now what I'll do is, inside that Angular application I'll be generating a library project. So for that I'll be using ng generate, then I'll say library project and the name of the library. So I can say demo library. Alright, but before generating that library, you must be careful about giving the naming convention. You should not give it to uppercase letter to the name of your library project. So let's generate this. So what it will do is it will generate the library project for us, and then it will update our angular.json, package.json and tsconfig.json of our Angular application. Now you might be wondering why we required an Angular application to create a library project, because both are a separate thing. So in order to use my library in an Angular application, or in order to publish my library, before publishing library, I want to check it to local Angular application whether it is working fine or not. That is why I am creating a library project inside Angular application. So let me show you what it has generated for us. Let me just open up my terminal, my solution explorer, and let me show you. It has generated a project directory, and inside the project directory it has generated the entire demo library project. Alright, I'll come back to this later, but before that it had made some adjustment to this angular.json, package.json and tsconfig.json. So let me show you. On angular.json it has added a projects. Inside that project parameter it has added the library project to our angular.json file. So here you can see on line number 124 it has added our project, which is a demo library project, to my angular.json file. Again I am saying you, these both are a separate thing. Library project is inside a project directory, and your normal Angular project, your Angular application, is inside a source directory. It is not compulsory to create an Angular application while creating a library. But in my case, I want to check, or I want to use a library in any of the local Angular application. That is why I am creating an Angular library inside a Angular application. Now as a next step, I'll show you what it has modified in package.json. On a package.json, it will add that Angular packager on line number 43 to generate our Angular packages dependency in a developer dependency. Then in a tsconfig.json it will store the output paths, so where our library should be compiled and stored. So it is added the output path to the distribution directory, and inside that distribution directory it will create our compiled library. So these are the adjustment will be taken care by Angular CLI itself. And now let me show you the directory structure of a project library project. So that library project is there should be a one file of package.json. So it will consist of all the peer dependency which your library required to run the library project. Then you have to set the name of your library project and version number. So that we will see when we publish it to the NPM registry. Right now it is not that much required. Again, then there will be a tsconfig.library.json file, which will be like our tsconfig.json of Angular application. And most important file is like this public API. Whatever the component, you can say it will be the entry points for the library project. Whatever the components, directives, services you want to expose to your library or expose to the Angular application, whenever user imports your library, you must need to declare it inside this public API surface. Then inside this lib directory, it has generated a basic component for us, like say for example demo component, and it is saying like demo library is working. Make sense? Now what I'll do as a first step, I want to use this generated library in my Angular application. Remember one thing, before using any library on your Angular application, we must need to build it. We cannot use library without building the distribution folder. So I'll open up my terminal. Even we didn't change anything in my library project, just created whatever created the project, whatever our CLI does, and then I'm using it on my Angular application. So in order to use it, I'll be required one command, and the command name is ng build and then name of my library. So name of the library is a demo library. Alright, so here I'll say ng build and demo library. Because of the CLI, it will create a distribution folder. Inside that distribution folder, our compiled library will be stored. So now if you can open your Solution Explorer, and you can see it has generated a build inside the dist directory. Now we can use this compiled library in our Angular application. So what I'll do over here, I'll open up my Angular application, and I'll open up my app module file, and on my app module file I'll say import. We can now import it like any other library packages. So if you have used material, you can say like import this package from the material library. So here I'll say okay, now import it from the demo library, which is the name of our library project, and from that library project I will import my module. So here I'll say material module, demo lib module. And now what this demo library module, I can say like when we generate the project using CLI, it has created this demo lib module for us, and inside this module we have registered our component demo library component. So I'll come to that point later, but before creating anything, I just want to show you how we can use the libraries. So I'll say demo library module, and now we can use my demo component on app component.html. So I'll get rid of this everything which got generated with the CLI project. Instead I'll say I want to use this demo component. Making sense? And now it's a routine how we can serve our application. I'll say ng serve, and I'll open up my browser first, and then I'll say localhost :4200. So it is saying that demo library works. Isn't it cool? Like, it's a simple thing. We just generated a library project and we used it in our Angular application. So now let me show you what our library project has generated for us, and then how we can generate more functionality to our library project. So let me open up this library project first. Inside that library project, you can see it has this source directory, and inside the source directory you can see the more I'll show you the most important file is public API. Whatever the library functionality you want to expose to the end user, we must need to register this in a public API file. Now inside this library you can see it has generated a demo library component, and that component selector is the library demo library which we have used in our HTML. And as you can see, it has a template of demo library works. Now let me generate a simple component for you, and that component we will use again the CLI. I'll say ng generate component, and the name of a component I would say counter, and then I would say we have to use that project flag in which project we want to add this component, and I'll say add this component to my library project. So I'll say Angular generate counter component and add it to my library project. So now I'm generating a fresh component. As you can see, it has also updated my module file demo library module file, and it has registered my component. So now let me open up that module for you. So that demo library module, and you can see like it has generated and registered my counter component to the declaration array. But in order to use in the another Angular project, we need to export. So I'll say okay, counter component on my module file, as well as I already explained you whatever the functionality you want to expose, you must need to declare it in a public API folder. So either we can use it through the module file, or if you want to use simple counter component, you can also use it with the this export. So here I'm saying export from, and I'll say the path, you can use it from the library, and counter, I'll say counter component. Make sense? Now on my counter component, I'll say I'll have like buttons, and I'll say this is for increment, and I'll create the click event, and I'll say on plus click, and then I'll say a label, and I'll say a string interpolation. I'll use the counter property, and I'll duplicate this, and I'll say that would be the button for decremented. So here I'll say on minus click. Make sense? So on my counter TypeScript, I'll first create one property, and I'll name it to counter, which is a type of number, and I'll assign it a value of 0. And then I'll create my callback on plus click, and another one is required on a minus click. So what I'll do is a simple counter. Whenever user press that plus button, I'll say this dot counter to plus plus, and whenever user press this minus button, I'll say this dot counter to minus minus. So it's nothing special. It's like a normal counter. Whenever user press this button, it will increment the value of counter, and whenever user press that minus button, it will decrement the value of that counter. Make sense? So now we want to use this counter in our Angular application. We have added this counter in our library project. All right. Now, in order to use it in our Angular application, first we need to create the build again. So I'll open up my terminal, and I'll say, okay, create the build for the library. Whenever you are making any change to the library, we must build it, compile it before we are using it. All right. So here I'll say ng build, and the name of my library. So I'll say demo library. Now it will generate a build again for the library project, and then we can use it in our Angular application. If everything goes well, it will show the generated compiled output in a distribution folder. So yes, everything is correct, and we have updated our library. And now in order to use it in our Angular existing application, what I'll do is I'll show you. We have already made some adjustment to the app module. We have imported our library, and we imported that module file. Now, as I told you, we can use the component directly if we want to use only that component. So we can import component over here, like how we imported the module, or we can use that component through module also. We already registered the component inside the module file. So now didn't change anything on my app module, and I'll open up my app component.html, and over here I'll say I want to use that library counter. So here I'll say this component leap counter I want to use, and I'll say okay. Now let me rerun the project again. So I'll say ng serve, and let me just open up my browser again. So I'll say this is the browser. Let me wait my library to compile first. So let me rebuild this. So still it is building my application, and yeah. So now if we open up, and we can see the counter is already showing it on our component. So now let us press this plus and minus. Yes, everything working correctly. So as I told you, like what is the benefit of creating a library? Now say for example you want to use this counter functionality in another Angular project, or you are having some kind of 3 or 4 application, in all the application you want to use that counter application. So that's the advantage of a library. Now what you can do is you can build this library as a package, and you can distribute to the node package manager NPM registry, and so that anyone can use it on that project. So now the first step is we need to create the pack file. We already created a distributed file, but that is a compiled file. Before publishing our library for a NPM registry, we must need to create the pack file, and the extension for that is .tgz file. So for that what I'll do is I'll open up my terminal, and I will navigate to the dist directory, distribution directory, and inside that distribution directory I'll navigate to my library folder, and I'll say over here I'll say let's say I want to generate the package. So I'll say npm and pack. So now what it will do, it will create .tgz file which is required for library. Make sense? So what it has done, it has created a library with demo lib name, version is 0.0.1, and it has generated the target file. Now what we can do is we can use this library anywhere or in any project we want to use. So now what I'll do is I'll just close this close this application, and I'll open up I'll say close this folder, and I'll say okay, now I want to create a new application, brand new application. So what I'll do is I'll say okay, inside this Angular demo directory I want to create ng new, and I'll say Angular app demo, and I want to create a brand new application. In that application I'll be using my library. So I'll say we did not require routing, CSS, and let's just wait to finish it for this application, generating the application. So now we generated a new application. Let me just open up my new application in my IDE. So I'll say open folder, and I'll say Angular demo, Angular app demo. So it's a normal Angular application. And again in which we are not generating a library project also. Instead, in this normal Angular application, we want to use our library which we already generated. All right. So what I'll do is I'll open my IDE in a separate window, and I'll show you where we actually generated our library. So I'll say open the folder, and we generated a library inside a demo application. So inside this demo application, you can see this is our generated library. So I'll just right click on that and I'll open up the path in Windows Explorer, so we can copy that path. We need this much path to point our library. Alright, so what I'll do is I just copy that path, and on my fresh application I'll open up the terminal and I'll say npm install, and just I need to adjust the front slashes backward, and I'll say okay. So demo lib, and remember we created that pack file .tgz file, so I'll open up that file, I'll copy that name, I'll give this name to my library .tgz. Now what it will do, it will install this library package to my Angular application. So now let's install this, and let's wait until it got finished. So now on my newly generated Angular project, I'll open up the package.json file, and in a developer dependency I'll show you on line number 22 it has added a local reference to my package. You can see it has the prefix file. Now let us say I want to use this library in my application. So as a first step I have to import the package, right? So I'll say import as a statement, and I'll say name of my library to demo library, and from that library I'll import my module, and the name of the module is demo library module. Then we need to declare this module inside the imports array. So I'll say demo library module, and now we can add we can use this library. Let's say I just save this file, and I'll open up my app component.html. So first let me get rid of this everything, and instead I'll say I want to call that counter component and lib counter. And now let us say I want to serve my application, so I'll say ng serve hyphen, or I'll say okay, let's do ng serve only, and let me just open up my browser first. So I'll say open in a new window, and I'll say localhost 4200. Yes, you can see the counter is working. Now this time we have created a counter in a brand new application where there is no project related to library, right? We have just imported our locally created library on our package.json. You can see let me show you that on the developer dependency on line number 22. You can see we are importing our local library. Now as a next step, we will publish this library to the NPM registry to make it available for all other user, or you can say you can use it anywhere in your Angular application. So now again what I'll do is I'll open up my project directory, and inside my project directory I'll open up this package.json file, and inside this package.json file you can see that my library project name is demo library. But now I want to publish this demo library to my npm.js. So again, in order to do that, I'll change the name, because that demo library is very common name and might conflict with another user having the same name. So the best practice for the library name, we should give the username of npm.js and then whatever the name we want to assign to our library. So in my case, I'm saying at @gmail.com, which is my username for npm.js, and then I'll say demo library. Now I have made a change to my package.json. So again, I need to create the entire process again. So I'll first generate the library build. So I'll say ng build and name of my library project. So I'll say demo library. So it will generate a build for us and we will wait so until that library is published. Okay, so library is build is generated. Now as a next step, what I'll do is I'll create. So now let's navigate to this distribution directory. Inside that library folder, I'll say create the pack file. So the command is npm pack. Now it will generate a pack file with the name of the package name which we provided, Jinal demo library. Now we can publish this package to our npm.js, and to do so, first we have to create an account on npm.js. So I'll open up my browser, and on my browser I'll say I already created this account on npm.js and I already signed in with my username. So now let's log into this npm.js, and for that command is npm add user, and that will ask you for the username of your npm.js. So I'll say username to Jinal. It will ask you for the password, so I'll enter my password. Then it will ask you for the email address, register email address. So I'll say jinal@gmail.com, and if everything went correct, it will logged in to my username. So now if I write npm publish and access flag to public, it will publish my library to npm JS. So as a last step, I will navigate to this npm JS, and then we can open up our library. So now on npmjs.com, let's navigate to this package under my profile, and you can see we published our first library to npm.js. And if we click on this npm package, and we have this installation instruction. So like how we copy this, or how we can how we are installing that third-party packages, we can simply copy this command and write it on terminal, and then we can use our libraries in our project. I hope you like this video. Thank you.